Okay, we might get started now. Hi everyone and welcome to this English Australia panel session about hybrid teaching and learning. I'm Sophie O'Keefe and I'm the Professional Development Manager at English Australia, and our panellists today are Clare McGrath, Education Consultant, Meaveen Sullivan, Senior Teacher at Navitas English Sydney, and Lucy Worthington, Centre Manager, Director of Studies and Pathway Manager at Navitas English Sydney. I'll be facilitating today's session by directing a number of questions to the panellists. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions via our registration page beforehand, and we've tried to include most of your questions in the discussion today. There'll also hopefully be some time left at the end where we'll invite other audience members to ask their questions. So hybrid delivery is new for most ELICOS teachers and institutions, and I'd like to thank our panellists for sharing their early experiences with hybrid delivery with us today. We realise that many audience members may also be delivering hybrid lessons, and we encourage people to share their ideas, their tips and their experiences in the chat. Before I begin our discussion with our panellists, I'd like to clarify the type of hybrid teaching we'll be referring to in this session. So hybrid delivery can take many forms and it's context specific, but in its more advanced forms, students can choose the mode that they'd like to study. However, for ELICOS institutions at the moment, hybrid delivery mostly refers to lessons in which remote students and in-person students participate in the same lesson, and where remote students are actively engaged synchronously in lessons and activities. So you can see a picture on the screen now of what an ELICOS hybrid class might look like, with some students and a teacher in a face-to-face lesson with technology in the classroom that enables remote students to participate in the lesson synchronously. One of the reasons why ELICOS centres are considering using hybrid delivery at the moment is that it enables colleges to cater for offshore students and onshore students in the one lesson, especially where the onshore students are already back on campus. So I think it's pretty fair to say that ELICOS centres at the moment are considering multiple scenarios in their planning for 2021, and hybrid delivery certainly offers a great deal of flexibility. So just before we begin the discussion with the panel, I'd like to invite audience members who are considering hybrid delivery or who are already using it to say in the chat what their hybrid delivery looks like. So who are your online students? Where are they? And what kind of technology are you using? You may like to also put a Y before your answer for yes, an N if you're not using it or considering it, and an M for maybe we're considering it as well. So if you can just type into the chat now. Great, and if you are considering it, who would your online students be? Okay, so we have a variation of students studying online offshore, but also at home, potentially onshore. Okay, so lots of people are considering it at this point in time, but someone's mentioned that it is quite expensive. Certainly there is an investment in technology. Great. Someone else has said 50% would be offshore students and 50% onshore students. All right, well, thank you for sharing that. All right, so now I'd like to ask our first question to our panellists. So, Lucy and Meaveen, could you tell us about why you've been using hybrid delivery at Navitas English Sydney?
Sure, thanks Sophie. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. So just to give a bit of background for Navitas English, we went online, probably like most other providers, at the end of March. We stayed online for about 12 or 13 weeks in Sydney, and then came back to campus at the beginning of July. When we went online, again, probably similar for a lot of you, is that we had I'll say a small exodus of students who immediately went back to their country once COVID hit, and continued happily to study with us offshore online. We realized as the restrictions were easing and we were able to come back to campus that we had this sort of looming problem of these existing students continuing to study, to be offshore and online. So we realized that we had to accommodate these students. And again, I'm not talking huge numbers. It was only just a handful per class, if that. So what we did is we got our IT team involved, and we came into campus beforehand, played around, a lot of trial and error with the IT team about how we could actually set it up so it's the best experience for those students. Once we'd kind of come to a position where we felt reasonably comfortable, we then invited all the teachers who were coming back to campus in for a training session before we went back fully face-to-face. We went through the tech setup, which has been a really, really integral part of it, and something that Meaveen will come on to later. It's been very, very important. And then we also did some training for the teachers to refresh them or retrain them on using the interactive whiteboards, which again for us has been quite an integral part, again something that Meaveen will cover. And the purpose of that is to try and get the teachers as comfortable as possible, and again a very challenging situation, yet another challenging situation, to get comfortable with doing what we've been calling dual delivery.
Okay, thanks Lucy. And Claire, could you tell us a little bit about why you've been using hybrid?
Well, my background, as you know, is with ELICOS, but actually at the moment the majority of the work I'm doing is with non-English language teachers in tertiary institutions with PD and support. So people doing pathway, diploma, other degrees. We with the PD, we had initially, of course, done that face-to-face, and then we were starting to do it in a hybrid mode anyway, with some people who couldn't come onto campus for the face-to-face sessions, but at the moment it's all online. Their classes are currently all online only. They have onshore and offshore students, a mixture of domestic and international, but we're looking at it for the future. So in order to remain viable, to broaden the access, but also to continue exploring elements of flexibility, because there's lots of different issues about why the students might not be able to get to the face-to-face scenario that they want. You know, visas, flights, family pressure, personal anxiety. Even the onshore students who are here, some of them want to stay online. It's saving them time, it's saving them money. They're not anxious about public transport, but we're looking at all those changes that might be possible from the personal to the political. So the background is we did a pilot project, 2 weeks, 2 classes, and gathered data from that. We've been recording interviews with teachers about their experience because they work in multiple institutions, surveys, all the PD that's surrounding that. Some small group projects are ongoing through this session, and we're looking at hands-on PD like Lucy and Meaveen did, to get some people back onto campus, the ones who are able to do that, and have others online so that the teachers can experience it firsthand and work out, you know, what happens if I do this. So we're aiming to have decisions made, systems set up, you know, with choices, so that there might be reminders or checklists for people about the setup of the physical classroom, their technology, troubleshooting, those kinds of things that can distract us very easily, to make those as simple as possible. And then looking at models of classes, getting lots of visuals, photos, recordings, so people can imagine what it would be like. And looking at particularly the planning. So, you know, supporting people in the planning of this.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I think it's safe to say that hybrid does rely on good technology and good bandwidth. Lucy and Meaveen, what technology have you been using to teach hybrid lessons? And can you tell us a little bit about how the classroom is set up and how this has been working for teachers at Navitas?
Sure, so I'm just going to share the screen. We've got a couple of PowerPoint slides just to help you visualize it.
Okay, is that sharing now?
Yeah.
Right, so with the pre-class tech setup, I might just go back a couple of slides just to say why this was, oh, I can't go back from there. Okay. This one. Okay, well, we just wanted to make sure that we could reduce the cognitive load as much as possible for teachers, because there was so much to remember and so much to think about that wasn't actually an inherent part of teaching per se. You know, we've got some amazing teachers, and suddenly they had to take all this on very quickly. So with the setup, there were some things that here's what you need to take into class. At Navitas, every classroom has an interactive whiteboard. We have a laptop available for the classroom, and obviously the desktop in the classroom. So these are things just as a checklist, right? Take these in. If you've got all of those, you're ready to go, walking in to do the tech. You need to allow extra time. You know, now the teachers just go in and it takes a couple of minutes, but when you're new to it, you have to make sure you have that extra time, otherwise it can get a little bit panic-stricken. But good news, it does get quicker and easier. So we had, there's a teacher who's just started with it this week, and last week, so she's done a week of it now, and she's already relaxing into it, you know, and has found that she's much enjoying using the whiteboard pen that she never wanted to touch before, I don't think. So to set up the class, with the desktop, some of these things are really basic, but they will troubleshoot. If you start the day off like this, it means some of the issues that could arise won't. So it seems, a pretty obvious thing, but start your desktop from off. If you just re-log in our systems anyway, sometimes the pen doesn't work, there are issues with that, so start from off. With your Zoom meeting, I think this is dependent on how your personal setup is the selections you've made, but for us, how most of the teachers have it, you need to make sure that if you click on that little downward arrow, that you have selected use my personal meeting ID. If you don't select that, it will generate a new one every time, and your students will not be able to log in. So we've all of this on the slides is in here because it's happened in some cases multiple times. So get in, have your personal ID, make sure it's coming with that. The laptop is going to provide the view of the IWB. This will make more sense when we see the final picture, but it literally gives another view. It's like having another student sitting in the class looking at the whiteboard, and it's what all the class can see of the whiteboard and the teacher. Put the laptop on the table in front of the IWB. Start from off, again, restart if needed. Check your internet connection. That's another issue. People are like, it's not working. It's like, oh no, the internet's, you just check your internet's on. Join the Zoom meeting. You do not need to log in. You're already logged in on the desktop. So you're just joining as a participant for an extra view. Mute your laptop audio. People will get skilled with using the audio, but that if you don't have that off, it will make squawking noises. And then you just adjust the view so that you get the student will have a good view of the whiteboard. We use interactive pens, so then this is the third element. You need to calibrate your whiteboard first, because that's another issue. If the pen is not connecting with the right section of the board, that's a problem in itself. So it takes a second to calibrate. So that is the type of view that the laptop will have of the teacher. So that's our teacher Carly calibrating. Just the calibration process is very quick. And then here's the whole thing. So you've got your teacher there, Martina. You've got your online students. You can see them on the board on Zoom. You've got your palette there if you're using an IWB. You've got your laptop with the view of the whiteboard and your desktop with the view of the class. And I think this is probably the most important one to get right. Well, maybe they all are, but you've got a nice view of the class. It means that the online students have a sense of, who's there, what's going on, and what's happening. I think did you have anything to add, Lucy? No.
Okay, great. So Claire, Navitas has obviously been using interactive whiteboards, but not every college has them. Do you know of any other tech equipment that colleges are using to deliver hybrid lessons? And also, what would you consider as the minimal possible tech that colleges could use to successfully deliver hybrid lessons? You're on mute, Claire.
Blathering away, there you go. We're kind of doing a two-hander here. Some places won't have the same range of technology, so the aim of this is just to think about what's the minimum we need, considering those things, the typical things there you can see that we do, what we do them with. I think where and with whom is particularly important in your own context, considering the size of the room, how many students you've got who are attending the physical classroom, if there are any current physical distancing requirements. So also thinking about how materials are accessed, shared, used, if you've got any data restrictions, bandwidth problems, if there is another physical space that you can be using in the corridor or a student area. So for example, in your class, there may be reasons why you would want some of your students in the face-to-face room to leave the room, maybe because of sound issues, to be working in another space with students who are online. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the majority of people do not record. So I don't think they record their classes, whereas in the context I work in, they do. So basically Zoom, as you've mentioned already, a desktop camera, I think it's very helpful if you get a pop-up webcam in that. If you haven't, there are ways you can get a webcam and attach it through the USB port. There are other clever things that people have done. There are different hacks for that. So if you don't have a pop-up webcam in the desktop camera, that's okay. The idea of the pop-up webcam in that it does give you another option in terms of the views that you've got, but definitely having a laptop, as you've mentioned already, Meaveen and Lucy, by having the laptop also logged in and maybe even a mobile phone, your own, you've got some different options there in terms of what view the online students have. Sometimes the desktop camera can be a bit fixed. You don't have a wireless keyboard, the cords are short. It might be easier for you to be presenting via that, but using the laptop as another kind of set of eyes, and it could be facing the whiteboard, it could be facing the students in the face-to-face room. You've got a couple of options there to play around with. The mobile phone, very handy, obviously, for, taking quick photos of things so that you can show other students, agents, other teachers, if you've got a problem as well, but for communications. And also students in the physical classroom having a laptop or another device. So particularly a laptop, not a mobile. It's quite difficult, I think, doing Zoom on a mobile. Headphones sometimes necessary as well, even just quite simple ones, so that you're reducing the amount of noise that's going around in the room, because audio can be a bit of a problem. If, you've got a wish list, a lapel mic might be handy, a collar mic, in other words. You may be using a data projector. Some people have been talking about how they've been using different cables, and there's a bit of information in the chat about that, using audio through the data projector rather than through the desktop PC. Yeah, and those are on my wish lists for other opportunities, because you've got to be considering the visual, not just what materials students need to be seeing, but also how they're seeing each other, and also the audio there. But I think one of the big things, apart from, you know, all of this, that it's important, as Meaveen and Lucy showed, the simplicity of the instructions, because everybody goes into a scenario like this, you know, tired, had a busy day, stuff going on, and you forget the simplest thing, like me forgetting to unmute myself at the beginning. If you've got those written down step by step, bang, 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 it's a great support to teachers. And also then thinking about the planning of not just the technology, but what they're actually doing, how they're managing the students online and face-to-face. And we'll talk more about that shortly.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Claire. Just to follow on from what Navitas were talking about with your classroom setup, there is a question from the audience. So Peter said that at Navitas, it looks like remote viewing students see other students in the class. Do they also see the teacher at the board? And can you explain how you chose what to display?
Yes, so we've got, basically the students got two viewpoints. So from the desktop computer, they can see, Meaveen showed that photo, so that broad view of the class. And then with the laptop, they can see the teacher when the teacher is at the board, but they can't actually see what's written on the board because of the glare. So that's why we use the interactive whiteboard and share the screen. And that's where the student can see everything that's being written on the board by the interactive whiteboard component of it.
You can see enough. You can see enough through that view to see there's something written and where it is. And in some cases you can read it, but it's not clear enough to be reliable. So it just gives you an idea of where the teacher is physically, what's on the board, and then they've got the other screen with the screen sharing for the PowerPoint or whatever it is that's being shown.
And in answer to the second part of the question is, how do we decide that? It was purely through trial and error, really. It was just playing around with what was going to be, focusing on what was going to be the best experience for the student, and we kind of came up with that scenario. Basically.
Okay, thank you. So again, another question for you, Lucy and Meaveen. How have Navitas teachers been preparing for their hybrid lessons? So for example, how do they share materials with their students? And what recommendations did you give teachers in their training about planning for their hybrid lessons?
Okay, so we're just going to share the screen again.
If we share through the screen, maybe, and then
Inevitable tech problems we're having, so please feel free to chat amongst yourselves.
if we go through the screen.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, we can start with that one. Yeah. Okay. Is this?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are two parts. I think within. I can't remember the exact wording of the question, but it was to do with preparation of materials and sharing of materials. So this first bit, this was again from really wanting to make sure it was very easy for the teachers. So if any of this is really basic and you already know it, apologies, but I just tried to make it as easy as possible. So if you're using, in our case, if you want to use the whiteboard pen, you have to share via the desktop. So on Zoom, when you say share, you have to choose that one screen and then do everything from there. Because it's intuitive to go, if you're doing PowerPoint, to go to the PowerPoint one, but you have to not do that because the pen will not show up. The pen is only present on our desktop. That might be different in different tech scenarios that other people have. So basically, don't use anything else that's there. Only use the screen share. And another issue that comes up is people would forget. And one teacher was just saying that to me today. She was like, "Oh, I keep forgetting to press the audio." But the worst that happens is the online students go, "We can't hear it." So you go, "Oh dear, yes," and go back in and turn that on. It's only a second, you know, and then you get to the point where you remember, I imagine. These were just some time-saving tips. So I find if I've just got really easy access to all my files on while I'm in the classroom, it's just really quick to get to anything. So I just put this on as an option if people aren't doing this. So you can right-click on any of the icons you want or a file, and then you can save to your start button or you can save to the taskbar. So for example, here's my home screen, and then click on that. Those are the things that come up, and the one that says Meaveen has all the class stuff in ready to go. Or I'll put all the apps I need will be down there. Again, quite a basic thing, but there is a few of our teachers that weren't aware of that, so they were spending a lot of time going in and out of files and trying to find things that they needed. And then the second part is the materials themselves. So this is with working with the teachers, and our teachers, I asked them, all the ones that do dual delivery, which is pretty much everyone, maybe not consistently, but on and off. The first thing is to work out how you're going to share it. Have an established system so that everybody knows. You might have an LMS, you might have Moodle. Some of our teachers don't like Moodle, or they prefer, let's say they prefer to use WhatsApp. And you can put WhatsApp on the desktop as well and just share everything that way. Or you can email, whatever, but have something so the students know what's happening when and when they're going to receive things. Extra time. Again, it does just take extra time to send it all through. Sometimes the files are big and you have to, on my Navitas email, I can't send larger files, so I'll put them through my own personal email, things like that. Have your Zoom ID somewhere ready to share, because you will need it when you walk into class. Keep your slides minimal. This means that the students who they've got the view of the class from the laptop, when the teacher's pointing at stuff, they can actually quite clearly see. They might not be able to read it sharply, but they can really see what's on the board. So it makes it easier for them to see what's going on. Page number on each slide, so that they can, if they've got a book, they can go and it's just easy for them to know exactly where you are. Put audio files in. You just go into the menu on PowerPoint, insert, and then insert audio or video, and it just makes life easier. So there's an example slide here. It's got the unit, the page, what the activity is, and the audio file is here. We're not going to do it then. And this will be, I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. And Claire, do you have any other advice for teachers regarding planning hybrid lessons?
In general, these messages about how clear and consistent the things that students are seeing and in writing and being told to do, how simple it is, they're crucial, but also given the circumstances, remembering options for choice and, empathy for everybody in this. I think it's all a bit crazy. The reminders, posters, checklists we've talked about, very important. Sticking a post-it note on something, particularly if you're presenting via one and you're moving another device around to get a different view. One of the teachers I work with uses an orange sock. So she remembers, she lays it over the laptop. That's the one that she wants to move around into the classroom. So say sometimes it's got the view of the class and other times she's moving it into a small group of students, or some of the online students are working with some of the face-to-face students through that laptop. Definitely co-opting students as your assistants in some way, and always, the plan B like we always need. But considering how you're going to communicate with students who might be having tech problems through different options, whatever works for you. But particularly in this case, they may be communicating with you. They may also be passing on messages to other people in the class who can then tell you, so you don't have to be monitoring all of these communications. I think that's important. The practice, hands-on, as often as possible, keep adjusting, but remembering the students will also need practice. We don't, we hear digital natives and etc. and you just think, not always true. So making sure that they have opportunities to, find out about these things and to help each other, using all those other strategies we use when things go wrong, about breathing and giving them something to do while you figure it out. The protocols you have with them, things about webcams, muting and unmuting, how they signal to you if they need help, but also the signals you're giving to the students about the task design. If they're as clear and as simple as possible, then that cuts down on the confusion between the verbal and the written and, what's going on in everyone's minds about what they have to do. I think it's also viable saying to them what you need them to do, what's going to help you survive all of this, because you're juggling an awful lot. It's the cognitive load, everything that's going on with teachers' brains juggling so many things. Things to consider, think about the roles that the students have, the ones who are face-to-face, the ones who are online. They may have different roles, they may have similar roles. You may have some students online and some students face-to-face who are, directing the conversation or gathering the questions or checking the answers or doing something. Thinking also, maybe sometimes you might need to decide, okay, at this time I'm going to work only with the face-to-face students and the online ones are doing a different task, and vice versa, in order to just give your head a bit of space. And you're looking at all the variations you've got in your planning when students are doing things alone, if you're monitoring people in the face-to-face room, or if you're jumping into a breakout room with some individual students, pair checking, peer reviewing, teamwork. There's lots of advantages to those. Stop screen sharing at times, get your face into the screen so that you can relax a little bit. Breakout rooms, of course, off Zoom activities, so that it's not all this intense, staring into webcams and looking at slides. For teachers, definitely considering systems of watching other teachers, jumping into other people's classrooms is really very, helpful now, being able to do that online. Maybe team teaching, so you've got somebody who's with you sometimes, if that's possible, to help you to manage some things and to, not do this forever, but as part of your PD and part of your peer support systems. Those are some things to consider. Technology, you get carried away with all of these new tools. I would pick and stick, use a system, use a setup, use some particular tech tools, stick with them for a while, see how they go. And yeah, accept also, sometimes, we can't do everything in the same way. People do say everywhere, all around the world, teaching online takes more time, and people are very stressed, people are tired, eyesight, back problems and things like that. I think there's a certain point when you've just got to go, these things are outside of my control. I can do this much today. And, thinking about getting head and neck massages for sure. The instructions, by the way, when I'm working online, I use very clear signals. So for example, the star points them to the task, the tick is the aims, that little whatever it is where they go to do the task or with what. Other things that might need to indicate the time, how feedback's going to be done, what's coming up next. And so that visual reminder is just going to make their lives a bit easier. And also for you, it helps keep you on track.
Okay, thanks, Claire. So I think probably regarding hybrid, the biggest question on everyone's mind is how we can ensure that the students studying online feel included in the classroom community and in class activities. So Lucy and Meaveen, could you tell us about how teachers at Navitas made sure that the online students felt included and successfully interacted with the in-person students?
Thank you. So yeah, inclusion. This is in these prep notes that I made for our teachers. This is kind of where we're trying to get to. The tech is just to enable the teaching, and then once you get to the teaching side of it, with those circumstances of having some people online and some in the classroom, what can you do to make that work? And I think the first thing is set expectations. There will be issues. There will be times when something goes wrong, tech, or someone falls out, or their camera doesn't work, or whatever. So normalize those, and we have students that we had one student who, one of the teachers was telling me she couldn't really participate. It was difficult for her to participate, something to do with the sound from at her end in some of the speaking activities. But yeah, she still has progressed very well, and her English has improved a great deal. So it may not be perfect, but it is still a valid and good learning opportunity for them. Keep the camera on wherever you can. Sometimes students, it's a bandwidth thing, or it's a, they don't necessarily want their surroundings to be seen, but it's so much better if you've got faces on screen and just in terms of engagement. Yeah, normalize glitches, they will happen. So just, go with the flow on those. But make sure you have a system. I mean, Claire was mentioning this with various signaling for things, but also for making sure you have an established system for how you will communicate if there is an issue. So you're not going to some meshes someone else meshes them and they've WhatsApped and what's going on. You just want to have a system that works. Have classroom routines. So in the morning, everyone says hello to the online students and then goodbye at the end of the day. So there's a kind of a ritual that is inclusive for them. If this may not be possible, but in some cases with our online students, they're still in Australia, but they're just too far away to come to class. So they made a trip, they made a visit to Sydney and caught up, and it was, it was like a joyful reunion of these people because they'd seen each other on the screen, but they'd never actually met in the flesh. Be aware of or mention the time difference. Some of these students are getting up at some awful hour of the morning to study, so to kind of acknowledge that as well, that they're here and having that commitment. Speaking activities and group work, I think Claire will be have additional things to add to this, but here's what we found. One idea is to assign in-class students each day. One of our Cambridge teachers did this. Everyone was given a role, or not everyone, but a student was allocated the role of, you're going to be doing speaking with the online student. So that whoever had that role, they knew they had their own headphones, or the online students can work together just as an initial idea, just while the teacher gets used to it. That can work quite well, and then you can start, because sometimes it's just too much information trying to manage the activity and who's got headphones and who you're putting together with and all of that. So that having the online students together initially while you get your head around it. Laptop. We use the laptop, as Claire said, with the sock. We haven't had a sock here, but we do move them around quite a bit. So they're a view of the board, they're a view of the class. You can do group work. We have taken them out, but I've also got students in the class. Let me just see when I was doing this. Oh yeah, so coming back to, sorry, I'll just stick with the order I've got here. If students can't be heard, use the chat box. Sometimes it does get overwhelming in group work, or it's just to use the chat, have that system to say, here's what I'd like to add. There's also often a time lag to consider. So that's another factor. And I think, again, it's just normalizing that. And it's just a pause before you might hear what the online students have to say. I mean, we've all seen it in the news in recent times. Some or all of the class can sign into Zoom. We get students to do that, and then it's easy. We can put them into breakout rooms with the online students. So they're essentially there in the same position as the online students in terms of interacting with the ones who aren't in class. And so they can do speaking activities with the online students. And I don't know about other school setups, but we have enormous classrooms now. We had big classrooms anyway, then we've merged them into 2 classrooms. So some of the students are actually quite far away from the whiteboard. So if they can just tap into Zoom, they can get a nice clear view of whatever PowerPoint is being shared. We had, we put a little, this, if you look on this screen down at the bottom, there's what is an online student, but that's I've just put I think I chose a wombat, but anyway, and you've got the webcam is much higher up, so you've got the online student down there, and then the webcam's actually up there. So if you can remember to look at the webcam rather than down at the bottom, otherwise the student's kind of looking at you and it might be the top of your head. One way that we've done this is just putting a little soft toy by the webcam, just as a little reminder for yourself. You might not remember all the time. So you've got the screen there, and then just remember to look up to it. Sophie, would you like me to play this video now?
Sure, yeah.
This was from one of our, she's happy for us to share this, one of our FCE teachers, Thais. She had an online student, and this was a video that the student sent Thais. So I'm not sure that we actually see the student, but we do see Thais on here. And she sent this to Thais at the end of her online experience, which was a 12-week, a CAE. Was it?
I think
FCE?
it was FCE.
Sorry, that's my mistake. It was FCE, but it was just a nice thing to receive at the end of quite a grueling 12 weeks. Oh, sorry, I've gone back. Let me.
Okay, thanks for that. I loved that video. What a really nice idea. So we've had a few questions come through in the Q&A, and also questions that were pre-submitted about audio issues. So essentially, I think people are saying that they've had trouble with the online students hearing the in-class students, and they'd like to know how you overcame this.
Who are you asking?
Yeah, so maybe Navitas, did you have this issue, and could you talk about how you overcame this?
Yes, we had a few teething problems. I think probably, I mean, I'm speaking for, I'm disclaiming here, I haven't actually taught dual delivery, but just being an observer and seeing that the sort of teething problems that we went through, there were definitely problems with the audio. Sorry, was the question specifically about audio on Zoom, for example? Or?
Yes, yeah. So if for example, if all the students go into Zoom, doesn't it cause feedback issues if they all sign into Zoom?
No, not that we found.
No.
We did find at the beginning, for example, when we were using the laptop, we had the two things. The laptop, we realized that we had to very simply just mute the laptop to those feedback issues. And I think maybe you can probably talk from experience about this in the classroom.
Well, yeah, having the minimizing the surround sound, so you're having it isn't as free flowing as a normal group discussion is, but you can have, if there's all sorts of noise and statics like any Zoom thing, you get people to mute, and then you have a system of selecting who's going to speak, and it's a bit more contrived, but it's possible.
Okay, Claire, did you want to add anything about audio issues to the discussion?
I think there's been quite a lot about it in the chat box already, and I can see that it's the variations in circumstances, you know, whether students have laptops, whether they have headphones, whether you have space. So I think it's one of those things you really need to sort out by this trial and error, because there's so many variations in circumstances, from the physical setup to the technical possibilities to what the students are doing, what they have to do with it.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, I certainly think that if there is poor broadcast of sound or audio interference, there's interference and the students will lose focus, the offshore students.
Yeah, and it's one thing that we did find, Claire's mentioned this, that we would often, thankfully we have the space here to do this, but we will take the laptop, or for speaking activities, they're fine with their phones, in the in-class students, and go to another area. So they literally, there's a lot less noise interference with whatever's happening around them.
Yeah. And did you mention also that like the online students get paired with a different in-person student each day, for example, and that student takes the laptop outside?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's set up so that that again just takes a few variables out of the equation. So it's just like, here's how we do it. You're going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so they know they have to come prepared, or they generally just come with their headphones when they know they might need to. But it's a quicker, easier thing. Having said that, if you don't have a closed class, it depends, I don't know in this at the moment how many new students there are coming in, but just to make sure, obviously don't give the new student that role for the day.
Yeah, but I think assigning roles is vital, because the only way that hybrid will work is if it's a student-centered class, because the teacher can't possibly do everything. All right. So Claire, I think if we can come back to you now about helping online students feel included in the classroom community. I know Navitas have spoken about how they've been ensuring that. Are there any other ways that people are using to ensure equity of inclusion for the online students?
A couple of points have already been made about what students online and face-to-face can see, but considering the types of tools and tasks that students are using, so that people are using the same thing. I've seen some people suggesting in the face-to-face class they use post-it notes, and in the online group they use the Miro website. And I just think, well, that's setting it yourself up for a disaster, because you're managing everyone using two different types of things. So trying simplifying it that way, moving the laptop around into a small face-to-face group, moving it back, muting, unmuting, whether or not that works. A couple of students on one laptop in the face-to-face class to reduce the amount of time where there's too many people talking over each other or with feedback. One of the other problems that helps solve is that online people find it hard to know when it's their turn. So having several face-to-face students on one laptop means that they're more likely to be aware of each other talking, and not all talking at once, and then the online students have got a bit of a chance. Of course, all those activities, the getting to know you, the find someone's who, anything that helps build common ground, getting them to take group photos and build on the profile information that they're collecting through the different activities that they're doing to share with you. But having them use that data, getting them to look at responses to tasks, getting them to respond to the information, to ask a question, to add something else, just to help make connections. Because sometimes, you do a getting to know you task and then boom, that's it, on to the next task, but using it in some way. Lots of options with the polls, private chat surveys, teaching students how to use the reaction buttons or the hands up when they're in breakout rooms, so that they do know exactly how to signal you and how to show you what's going on, how to inform you what's going on. The turn-taking signals I mentioned, the roles, if somebody's had 3 turns in this activity, you've got to wait until everyone else has had their 3 turns. There are a couple of multiple stopwatches if you wanted to do that. Virginia Moore, I know you're here. I tried to find yours, but I couldn't find it. So where one person, it's their job to time who's having a turn, and you just have to be pretty quick to work out stop, start, but with different stopwatches. I think renaming themselves, you can write at the end of your name, for example, the name of the place where you are now, or what you had for breakfast, or something like that, so that they can all, be using different affordances in Zoom to...
seem to have lost Claire. Okay. That's fine. I'm sure she'll come back. So while we're waiting for Claire to come back, Lucy and Meaveen. Oh, Claire, you back? We just lost you there for
Okay.
the last point, I think.
Okay. Just virtual backgrounds. It could be a picture about the place where they live, but getting them to hide their self view so that when they're looking at the gallery view, they're not always looking at themselves and how they appear. The chains, you know, when you ask a question, you direct it to one student and then they have to ask another student. So it's not you all the time who's thinking, well, who have I asked? It's the students who are doing that. Study buddies, people keeping an eye on each other for today or this week. Mixing up people in the breakout rooms face-to-face and online, but also using them for consultations. You know, opportunities for peer teaching, mini presentation, virtual tours. If they can't get into the campus, they can bring, you know, the outside into the face-to-face classroom. Audio and video recordings, you know, other artifacts they can be sharing, but also activities they could be doing out of class and online together in their free time. There are lots of different things that people are interested in. And I'm just going to skip through this for a second because it's about the interaction and communication. Ask your students what they would like to do and how they would like to do it, because often they've got a solution to your problem. There's the affordances in Zoom that we're all using, including automatic allocation in breakout rooms or manual. So your students might rename themselves with a number in front of their name and you can very quickly manually allocate them to different groups. Communications, Google, discussion forums in the LMS. So they might be interacting outside of class in these ways as well. You can have a private Facebook group or use what's called Fake Book. That's in class tools there. So that could be another way for you to be communicating with students that's not in Zoom. Padlet and Miro. Padlet, I think, is a really good option for this, and we'll have a quick look at that. Miro, basically, they're online post-it notes. Jamboard, very similar, but having them interacting and creating things for other students, you know, they create their own Quizlet and pass it on to other people or their Kahoot. So just a brief look at Padlet. When you set up your own Padlet, you can have a choice of how it looks, but you can add something by clicking on that button. I would just make sure you have, you know, students putting in some kind of keywords and then they can write their thoughts and their questions, but they can upload or link or, you know, do all sorts of things here with audio, video, etc. And then other people can respond to theirs. So this is a way of having students interacting with multiple different media in one place for different purposes. And it could be this is a Padlet that goes on during the week or goes on during the course that they're adding things to for personal reasons, for course related content issues. So yeah, I just think remembering this comment from Rachel Roberts, you know, focus on what you can control and not what you can't. So that was trying to bring it in with a bit of time for more questions and answers.
Okay. So we do have to wrap up soon, but we had a question submitted before the session from one of the audience members. And I guess it was a I wish I'd known kind of question. So Lucy and Meaveen, what was the biggest immediate challenge that Navitas had when moving to hybrid? And what steps did you take to overcome it? Any lessons learned would be helpful.
I mean, I think everything that we discussed about those things of the tech setup and the inclusion of materials and all those little tips, I think probably one thing that really struck me is the mental load on teachers. And
yeah,
you know, we'd gone through the online process, which had been an enormous cognitive load for all of us. And then we came back to campus, but then with this extra dimension to it, and really acknowledging, I think, how much extra preparation goes into it. And Meaveen's mentioned this as well, and she's doing it. You know, the extra preparation, the extra thought that needs to go into something that, you know, for a lot of us, we're just used to doing, standing on our heads. So just being aware, you know, both for teachers and for academic support staff, is just that extra load that it's putting on teachers, I think, has been the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we can probably take one more question from an audience member. So if anyone does have any burning questions they'd like answered, please pop it into the Q&A box. Okay. So this one might be for Navitas as well. How have you been conducting your assessments for the hybrid classes?
All of our hybrid classes are not high stakes courses. So
Okay.
all of our current our academic English classes still remain online actually. So we have arts preparation, Cambridge and general English, but we run our assessments as we have done normally. But there hasn't really been an issue as it hasn't been pertinent to that.
I'd just add to that though, it is for the students doing exam classes, they have found it really beneficial to have an LMS like we have Moodle, so that when it's all loaded up there, you can just go back in. So like FCE, the Cambridge suite, with the once the exam practice is in, it's there for every course, and any student can get, you can make it visible, whatever, but it's there, so it's easy. I think it makes it an easy option, so you can have your on-campus students can also go and access that in their own time if they wish to.
Yep.
In the same way that the online ones can.
Okay. This question's come up a couple of times also for Navitas. What's the feedback been like from online students?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we haven't had a huge amount, which is probably, I don't know, no news is good news, I guess. But I mean, generally, I don't know if we've had some very challenging students, let's put it like that, who've been online for various reasons, and particularly for the class that Meaveen and one of our other senior teachers, Carly, it's been hugely challenging teaching a couple of these students for various reasons. But generally speaking, we have not had any pushback from students and agents as well, which we would normally hear something from. So I think we can take that as being reasonably successful through the hard work of all of the teachers and the academic team.
And I think, again, setting the expectations before they start makes a huge difference, and the teachers, teachers are really skilled at managing a room and checking in with everyone. So they just take that into the students as well. So I think they do feel nurtured and taken care of and included, because any of our teachers would notice if there was one that wasn't part of the group in some way.
Okay.
And I think the teachers have worked really hard to get buy-in to this mode of delivery from the other students as well, just making it normalized. And I think that's been really important. Instead of being this big, scary, strange thing in the corner, it's actually just part of the normal lesson now. And I think that's really helped with making it work.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. Okay, well, we do have to finish up soon. We've got some resources on the slides. So I've just listed some great references actually about hybrid delivery. A few people have been asking in the chat if the slides and the recording are going to be shared. Yes, they will. We'll email people with the details of where they can find them. I'd also just like to encourage people to continue this discussion about hybrid delivery. One place that you can do that is in the English Australia EdTech Facebook group, and there's just details of how to join that there. You can also sign up for the EdTech newsletters if you're a member of English Australia, if you work for an English Australia member college. So now we've come to the end. I would just like to thank our three panellists, Claire, Lucy and Meaveen, for generously sharing your experiences with us, and thank everybody for coming as well. Have a great afternoon.
That was really interesting. I've just saved all the chat box. Oh, hello, everyone who's still here. I think some of those issues that people have brought up about different contexts are really helpful for future webinars, and also about the pedagogy, that point that's been brought up. But the audio issue, I think we need to collect more data about where, how people are setting things up.
Yeah.
Because
That we had umpteen audio issues initially when people just didn't know like how to use the little speaker icon that you right click on and you can select what audio is coming out of where, and you know we've got they could be coming out of big speakers or they could be coming out of the desktops and so on and so on. So there's things like that.
But we need to consider people who also don't have an interactive whiteboard.
Yes.
You know, I saw one person talking about the data projector, for example. They were using that to for the sound. I'm not quite sure how. If we go back through the chat box, you can talk. You'll see there was somebody talking about the cable that they used. You also mentioned having an extension cable in your setup. I was just curious.
Oh, it's because the laptop doesn't have enough battery on it to last, so we have to have it plugged into the wall.
Oh, so it's an extension cord for power.
Yeah. Yes. That's all.